Lieutenant Commander Elena Marquez had dreamed of flying since she was a little girl. While other kids were playing with dolls or video games, she would sit near the airfield outside her small hometown in Texas, watching jets roar into the sky. Her father, a retired Navy mechanic, used to tell her stories about the pilots he'd worked with. Men who were fearless, skilled, and respected. Elena promised herself that one day, she would be one of them. But that dream wasn't easy. From the first day she entered flight school, she felt the weight of being the only woman in the room. The instructors didn't treat her badly, but they didn't take her seriously either. Every time she made a mistake, people whispered that it was because she wasn't built for combat. And every time she succeeded, they said it was luck. Elena learned to ignore the comments to let her flying speak for her. She was quiet, focused, and determined. By the time she earned her Navy wings, she was known as one of the sharpest pilots in her class. She didn't brag, didn't talk much, but when it came to flying, she was in complete control. Her confidence in the cockpit was something even the men admired, though most wouldn't admit it. One night, after a long training mission, her squad gathered in the hangar joking around, tossing out call signs for the new pilots. Some got names like Hawk or Ghost. When it came to Elena, someone smirked and said, "How about Black Widow? She flies alone, and nobody who doubts her survives." The others laughed. It was meant to be a joke, a teasing nickname for the only female pilot in the group. Elena didn't laugh. She just gave a small smile and nodded. "Black Widow," she said quietly. "I'll take it." At first, the name was just another thing for people to joke about. Some said it sounded too dramatic. Others said it didn't fit her because she was too calm, too disciplined. But Elena didn't care. She knew that names meant nothing, actions did. If they wanted to laugh, they could. She'd show them why the name would one day mean something entirely different. Over the next few months, she worked harder than anyone else in her unit. She studied mission routes late into the night, memorized terrain maps, practiced every emergency maneuver in the book. When others went out for drinks, she stayed behind to fly one more simulation. Her commanding officers began to notice her discipline. She wasn't the loudest or strongest, but she was the most precise. When it came to handling pressure, no one did it better. Her fellow pilots started to change their tune. They began asking her for advice quietly, when no one was watching. A few even started using her call signs seriously, no longer as a joke, but as respect. Still, there were those who couldn't stand the idea that a woman was outperforming them. Rumors spread that she was only favored because of diversity politics. Others said she'd never survive a real combat mission, that she was good in training but would fall apart when things got dangerous. Elena heard every word. She didn't respond. Instead, she trained harder. She wanted her performance to do the talking. When the day came for her to join a joint SEAL operation as part of a special air support unit, it felt like her entire career had been leading to this. The mission was dangerous and only the best were selected. Elena was one of them. It was her chance to prove that she wasn't there to fill a quota. She was there because she was the best for the job. Before deployment, the pilots gathered for a briefing. The room was full of high-ranking officers, SEALs, and experienced flyers, most of them men. When Elena introduced herself with her call sign, there was a wave of chuckles around the table. Someone whispered, "Black Widow's here to save the day." Even the Admiral smiled and said, half-jokingly, "That's quite a name. Let's hope you live up to it." Elena simply nodded, opened her mission folder, and started reviewing the plan. She didn't say a word. Inside, though, she felt the familiar burn, that quiet determination that always came when people doubted her. She had felt it since flight school, since the first time someone told her she didn't belong. She knew this mission would be her chance to silence every doubt once and for all. After the meeting, she walked out onto the airfield, looking at the rows of aircraft gleaming under the sunset. The sky was painted in gold and orange, and for a moment, she let herself breathe. She remembered her father's words, "Courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing your duty while you're afraid." She smiled faintly, resting her hand on the side of her helicopter. "Black Widow," she whispered to herself. Let's show them why they'll never laugh again. That night, as she prepared for the upcoming mission, her reputation started to spread quietly through the base. Some of the men who had mocked her began to wonder if maybe they had underestimated her. There was something about the way she carried herself, calm, confident, unshakable, that made people take notice. Elena didn't crave their approval. She wasn't fighting for pride or attention. She was fighting for respect, the kind that's earned through courage, not words. And deep down, she knew that the moment of truth was coming soon. Because when the time came to fly into danger, when chaos filled the skies and everyone's lives depended on her, the world would finally understand what her call sign truly meant. She wouldn't need to explain it. She would prove it. The morning of the mission briefing was tense. Everyone in the naval base could feel that something big was coming. Soldiers walked fast, carrying files and radios, and officers moved in and out of the command center with serious faces. The air smelled of coffee, metal, and nerves. It wasn't just another mission. This one involved a rescue deep inside enemy territory, and everyone knew the risks were high. Lieutenant Commander Elena Marquez walked through the long hallway toward the war room, holding her helmet under her arm. Her uniform was spotless, her hair tied back neatly, and her expression calm, even though her heart was beating faster than usual. This was her first time being part of a SEAL joint operation briefing, an honor that only a few pilots ever achieved. She had earned her place through hard work, but she also knew many people in that room didn't think she belonged there. When she reached the big steel doors of the war room, she paused for a second, took a deep breath and pushed them open. The room was filled with high-ranking officers, including the legendary Admiral Richard Cole, a man known for his fearless missions and blunt attitude. Around the table sat SEAL team leaders, intelligence officers, and other pilots. Every one of them turned their head when she walked in. Elena introduced herself formally. Lieutenant Commander Elena Marquez, call sign Black Widow. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, a few quiet laughs broke out. One of the younger officers smirked and whispered something to his friend. Even the Admiral raised an eyebrow and said in a slightly teasing voice, "Black Widow, huh? That's quite a name. Hope you bite harder than you sound." The room filled with low chuckles. Some people tried to hide their smiles. Others didn't bother. Elena stood still, not saying a word. Her face didn't change, but inside, she felt the familiar sting of doubt. Something she had faced all her life. Still, she didn't let it show. She had learned long ago that silence could be more powerful than arguing. She opened her mission folder and said in a calm, steady voice, "You'll see, sir." That quiet reply caught the Admiral's attention. He didn't respond, but his expression shifted slightly. There was something in her tone. Not arrogance, not attitude, just quiet confidence. The briefing began. The large screen lit up with satellite images, showing the region where the SEAL team was trapped. Enemy territory, rough terrain, radar systems everywhere. The mission, called Operation Iron Dusk, was dangerous. A SEAL reconnaissance unit had gone deep into a hostile zone and was now surrounded. The job was to extract them before enemy forces closed in. Elena listened carefully, taking notes while others interrupted with questions or comments. She didn't speak unless asked, but she was studying every detail, the wind direction, the radar positions, the timing. Her mind was already planning how to fly through the storm of danger. At one point, another pilot, Commander Briggs, spoke up. "Sir, this is a high-threat airspace. If anyone goes in there, they're gonna get lit up like a Christmas tree. We need the best pilot we've got." Before the Admiral could respond, someone at the table chuckled and said, "Guess that means Black Widow's sitting this one out." A few more laughs followed. Elena didn't react. She just looked at the map, tracing the route with her finger. Her calm made the laughter fade faster than anyone expected. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but firm. "If I take the northern corridor at low altitude, we can avoid most of their radar. It's a longer path, but it'll keep us off their screens. I can lead the first bird in." The room went quiet again. Everyone turned to look at her. The Admiral studied her face for a few seconds. He wasn't used to young officers, especially not quiet ones. speaking with such certainty. He leaned forward and asked, "You're confident you can pull that off?" "Yes, sir," she said without hesitation. "I've trained for this kind of terrain. I know the risks. I also know the odds of success go up if we keep our altitude low and use the terrain to mask our signal." There was no pride in her tone, no need to prove anything. She was simply stating facts. The Admiral nodded slowly. "All right, Black Widow," he said finally. "Let's see if that name of yours means something after all." From that moment, the mood in the room changed slightly. People weren't laughing anymore. There was a quiet respect growing thin, but real. After the briefing, the officers started leaving the room. Some passed Elena without a word. A few gave her short nods. Commander Briggs stopped beside her and said, "You've got guts, Widow. Let's just hope your plan works." "It will," she replied softly. As the room emptied, Elena gathered her notes and looked up at the mission map one last time. The red dots showing enemy positions looked like drops of blood scattered across the desert. The task ahead was terrifying, but she didn't let fear take over. She thought about the trapped SEAL team, about the lives depending on her flight, and about every person who had ever told her she couldn't do it. The Admiral was the last to leave. He stopped by the door, turned slightly, and looked back at her. "We'll see you in the air, Black Widow," he said. His voice wasn't mocking this time, it was serious. Elena gave a respectful nod. "Yes, sir." When the door closed behind him, she exhaled slowly. The laughter, the doubt, the jokes about her name, all of it washed away. Now all that mattered was the mission. Outside, the sky was turning dark. The sun had disappeared beyond the horizon, and the first stars were beginning to appear. The world felt heavy with silence. Elena walked toward the flight hangar, the sound of her boots echoing off the concrete. Soon she would be in the air where she belonged. Soon, Black Widow wouldn't be a name people laughed at. It would be a name they remembered. The mission was called Operation Iron Dusk, and even the name sounded heavy. It was the kind of mission that made every soldier check their gear twice and write one last letter home, just in case. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew this was not going to be easy. The objective was clear but dangerous. A SEAL reconnaissance team had been ambushed while collecting intel near the Yemeni border. They were surrounded by hostile forces, running low on ammo and supplies. Communication had been cut off, and the window to save them was closing fast. The Navy had already lost 2 drones trying to locate them. Now, the only way to bring those men home was a manned extraction, and that meant someone had to fly straight into enemy territory. Elena Marquez, known by her call sign Black Widow, sat quietly in the planning room as the mission details were discussed. Around her, senior pilots argued over the best approach. Some wanted to send drones first, others said it was too risky for a helicopter team. But deep down, everyone knew drones couldn't bring people home. They needed a pilot who could fly low, fast, and fearless. Admiral Cole finally looked at the room and said, "We're going in at 2,300 hours. 2 Black Hawks. 1 main bird for extraction, 1 for air cover. We need someone to lead the mission." There was silence. Everyone looked around, waiting for someone else to volunteer. Elena spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "I'll lead it, sir." A few heads turned sharply. One of the older pilots frowned. "With respect, Commander Marquez, this isn't a training op. That zone is crawling with anti-air systems. You'll be flying into a wall of fire." "I know," she replied simply. "But I've trained for low-visibility extractions. I can handle it." Admiral Cole stared at her for a few seconds, trying to read her face. He wasn't sure if she was brave or crazy. Maybe both. "You understand what you're walking into, right?" he asked. "Yes, sir," she said. "If we don't go now, those men won't make it to sunrise." The Admiral nodded slowly. "Then suit up, Black Widow. You've got the lead." As the meeting ended, tension filled the air. Some pilots patted her on the shoulder, half in support and half in disbelief. Others whispered that she was volunteering for a suicide mission. Elena ignored them. Her focus was on the faces of the SEALs trapped out there. She had seen their photos in the mission file, men with families, with lives waiting for them back home. She couldn't let them die out there. Hours later, the base lights dimmed to red for night operations. The two Black Hawk helicopters stood ready on the tarmac, their engines rumbling like beasts waiting to be unleashed. The sound was deafening but comforting to Elena. It was the sound of purpose. Her co-pilot, Lieutenant Jackson, climbed in beside her. He was young, sharp, and nervous. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "they say the enemy's got Stinger missiles out there. If they lock on to us, we won't have much time to react." Elena looked at him with calm eyes. "Then we make sure they never see us coming." She strapped on her helmet, flipped the switches, and watched as the instrument lights came alive. The radio crackled with the voice of Admiral Cole. "Widow 1, this is command. You are cleared for takeoff. Godspeed." "Copy that, command," Elena replied. Widow 1 lifting off. The Black Hawk rose smoothly into the night sky, followed by the second helicopter, Widow 2, piloted by Commander Briggs. The city lights faded behind them as they crossed into the darkness of the desert. The world below turned into an endless sea of sand and shadow. Flying at night in enemy territory was like balancing on the edge of a knife. One mistake, one wrong altitude, one radar ping, and they would be shot down before they even reached the extraction zone. Elena kept the helicopter low, just 50 feet above the ground, using the dunes and hills as cover. Every second required full concentration. The radio remained mostly silent, except for short updates. Altitude steady. Speed at 110 knots. No radar contact. Jackson glanced at her a few times, amazed at how calm she looked. She flew with a steady hand, as if the danger didn't scare her at all. But inside, Elena could feel the pressure building. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her breathing steady. She had one rule: never let fear control your hands. After an hour of flight, the radar suddenly beeped. Jackson's voice shook slightly. "Ma'am, we've got movement. Possible enemy patrols ahead. 3 clicks out." "Copy," Elena said. "Hold course. We'll slide under their coverage." She gently lowered the chopper, skimming so close to the ground that the blades kicked up waves of sand. The desert wind howled outside, but she didn't flinch. The radar ping disappeared. "Lost them," Jackson said, exhaling in relief. "Good," Elena replied. "Stay sharp. We're not in the clear yet." As they neared the extraction zone, the terrain became rougher. Mountains, canyons, and ridges that could hide enemies anywhere. The signal from the trapped seals was faint but still alive. Elena knew they didn't have much time left. Command's voice came over the radio. "Widow 1, you're approaching hot zone. Expect heavy resistance. Proceed with caution." Elena responded calmly. "Roger that, command. We're going in." She could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. Every life, every SEAL out there, depended on her decisions in the next few minutes. She tightened her grip on the controls, eyes scanning the darkness. This was it. This was the moment where her years of training, all the doubt, all the mockery, all the whispers behind her back, would finally mean something. As the chopper cut through the night air, she whispered under her breath, "Hang on, boys. The Black Widow is coming." The night was darker than usual, the kind of darkness that made the desert feel endless. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the wind blew fine sand across the ground like waves in an invisible ocean. From inside the cockpit, Elena Marquez could see almost nothing ahead, just the faint green glow of her instruments and the occasional flicker on the radar screen. The radio was filled with quiet static. Everyone was listening, but no one spoke. Both helicopters, Widow 1 and Widow 2, were flying low and silent, moving like shadows over the desert. Their engines were running quietly, but the tension inside the cockpit was loud. 2 minutes to target zone, her co-pilot Jackson whispered. His voice was tight with nerves. Elena nodded slightly. Her hands stayed steady on the controls. She was completely focused now, her heartbeat slow, her breathing calm. The rest of the world faded away. All that mattered was the mission. Somewhere ahead, a team of SEALs was surrounded, waiting for her to bring them home. Then suddenly the radar beeped. Jackson's eyes widened. Incoming signal, heat signatures ahead. Looks like enemy vehicles. Before Elena could respond, a red light blinked on her console. Missile lock. Missile. We've been spotted, Jackson shouted. Elena's voice was calm but sharp. Evasive action. Hold tight. She slammed the controls forward, sending the helicopter into a steep dive. The desert rushed up toward them as she dropped altitude fast, almost skimming the sand. A missile streaked through the sky above them, missing by a few meters and exploding in the distance. The shockwave rocked the helicopter, but Elena kept control. Command, Widow 1 taking fire. Jackson yelled into the radio. Static. No response. The enemy's jammers had cut off communication. They were alone. Elena checked the map display. We can't go back. They'll shoot us out of the sky. We stay low and move through the canyon ahead. It'll hide us from their radar. Jackson looked out the window, his face pale. That canyon's tight. One wrong move and we're done. Elena gave a small, grim smile. Then we don't make a wrong move. The helicopter roared forward, diving into the narrow canyon. The walls rose high on both sides, and the moonlight disappeared completely. The only light came from the instrument panel and the faint shimmer of the blades cutting through the air. Elena guided the chopper through the twisting path, inches away from the rocky walls. Her concentration was total. Altitude steady, Jackson reported, his voice trembling slightly. You're flying blind. Not blind, she said softly. Just trusting the dark. For a few long minutes, the world outside was nothing but shadows and wind. Then the radar lit up again, multiple signals closing in from behind. Enemy trucks and anti-air vehicles were moving toward their last known position. They were being hunted. Widow 2, report. Elena called, but only silence answered. She felt a chill. Something was wrong. Then, over the radio, Briggs's voice came through, broken by static. We took a hit. Engines failing, going down. Widow 2, hold position. Elena shouted, but it was too late. Through the darkness, she saw a flash in the distance. Fire blooming against the desert floor. Her escort helicopter was down. For a brief moment, she closed her eyes. She wanted to grieve for her teammates, but there was no time. The SEALs were still waiting. She forced herself to stay focused. Jackson, she said firmly. Switch to manual navigation. No radar. We go silent. He hesitated. Silent? Ma'am, that means we disappear, she said. Stay with me. We're ghosts tonight. She cut all external comms, dimmed the lights, and dropped the helicopter even lower. They flew so close to the ground that the rotors kicked up dust clouds behind them. Every vibration, every gust of wind felt sharper now. The desert wasn't just a battlefield anymore. It was a living thing trying to swallow them whole. After several tense minutes, the radar finally went quiet. They had escaped the lock-ons. But now they were flying blind with no contact from command and no backup. The only thing guiding them was instinct. Jackson looked over at her. How are you so calm right now? Elena didn't take her eyes off the terrain ahead. I learned a long time ago, panic doesn't change the outcome. It just gets you killed faster. She remembered her father's words, the same ones that had carried her through training. A pilot's job is to stay calm when everyone else is braking. As they approached the extraction zone, a faint distress signal blinked on her screen. It was weak, almost gone, but it was enough. They're close, she said. Half a mile north. The desert below was uneven, scattered with rocks and burnt vehicles. She slowed the chopper, eyes scanning for movement. Then she saw it, a small cluster of lights flashing in a coded pattern. The SEAL team. Elena brought the helicopter down carefully, the wind blowing sand everywhere. The landing skids touched the ground with a soft thud. Go! Go! She shouted as the back door opened. 2 SEALs ran out of the darkness, followed by 3 more, all covered in dust and blood. Their leader, Commander Hayes, jumped aboard last, shouting over the roar of the blades. You're a sight for sore eyes, Widow. Everyone accounted for? She asked. 6 of us. Let's get the hell out of here. Elena pulled the control lever, and the helicopter lifted off again, just as gunfire erupted from the ridge behind them. Bullets tore through the air. Jackson shouted, "They're lighting us up!" Elena banked sharply, dodging tracer rounds. "Hold on!" she yelled. The chopper twisted and climbed, bullets grazing the tail. Her hands moved like lightning, precise, confident, fearless. For a moment, it felt like the whole sky was on fire. But she didn't stop. Through the chaos, she guided the Black Hawk through the storm of gunfire. Her mind steady, her purpose clear. Every second, every move mattered. There was no fear, no hesitation, only skill and resolve. By the time they cleared the canyon and rose back into open air, the gunfire had faded behind them. The desert below grew smaller and quieter. Jackson turned to her, still breathing hard. "I thought we were done for." Elena kept her eyes on the horizon. "We're not done until they're home." The men in the back sat in silence, watching her, realizing that the woman they had once doubted was the reason they were still alive. That night, somewhere between the stars and the sand, Black Widow became more than a call sign. It became a promise. The desert was alive with chaos. The sound of gunfire echoed through the night, mixing with the roar of the helicopter's blades. Elena Marquez gripped the controls tightly, every muscle in her arms tense. The helicopter shook with every hit of wind and passing bullet. Her focus was razor-sharp. One wrong move could mean death for everyone on board. "Multiple hostiles closing in from the east," her co-pilot Jackson shouted, his eyes wide as he scanned the radar. "They've got RPGs. We can't stay low anymore." Elena didn't panic. Her voice stayed calm and steady. "Hold your position. I'm taking us higher, just enough to gain speed." She pulled the stick gently, lifting the helicopter through a cloud of smoke and dust. The SEALs in the back were shouting, firing short bursts out of the side doors to keep the enemies back. Sparks flashed in the darkness where bullets hit the helicopter's armor. Then suddenly the radar beeped again, another missile lock. "Missile incoming. 2 o'clock, Jackson yelled. Elena reacted instantly. She tilted the helicopter hard to the right and dropped altitude again, sending the aircraft into a steep, controlled fall. The missile whooshed past, exploding just behind them in a ball of orange fire. The shockwave hit the helicopter, shaking it violently. The SEAL leader, Commander Hayes, held onto the frame and shouted, "Are we hit?" Elena didn't answer right away. She checked the systems, warning lights flashed, but the helicopter was still flying. "We're good," she said finally. "But we won't be if we don't lose them fast." Ahead, the desert opened into a wide valley surrounded by jagged cliffs. The radar showed more enemy signals closing in. They were trapped unless Elena did something impossible. Her eyes scanned the terrain. The cliffs were steep, and the wind currents were strong, but there was a narrow space between 2 ridges that could be used for cover. It was risky. No one would ever try to fly through there in the dark. But she didn't have a choice. "Hold tight," she said. "We're going through the rocks." Jackson stared at her. "Ma'am, that's suicide. Not if we're fast enough." Before he could argue, she pushed the helicopter forward. The engines screamed as they sped toward the cliffs. The SEALs in the back went silent. Everyone could feel it. The tension, the fear, the unspoken trust that their lives were in her hands. The walls of the canyon grew closer and closer. The space was so tight that even a small mistake could rip the rotors off. Elena flew like she was one with the machine, her eyes fixed, her hands smooth, her instincts leading her. The helicopter weaved through the jagged rocks, every turn a dance with death. Behind them, another missile launched. The radar screamed its warning. Jackson shouted, "They fired again! We'll never outrun it." Elena's eyes flickered to the screen, then back to the dark canyon ahead. And that's when she made a decision that would later be known as the Widow's Drop. She pulled back sharply, then suddenly cut power and tilted the chopper nose first into a near-vertical dive. The helicopter dropped like a stone, spinning slightly before she powered up again at the last second, leveling out just above the canyon floor. The missile shot right past them, losing its lock and smashing into the cliffside. The explosion lit up the canyon like lightning, throwing dust and rock everywhere. But Elena held control, guiding the chopper through the falling debris. Jackson stared at her, speechless. "I can't believe we're still alive." Elena didn't look up from the controls. "Believe it," she said simply. When they finally cleared the canyon, the radar went silent. The enemies had lost them. But the helicopter wasn't in good shape. The left engine was smoking, and several warning lights flashed red. "We've got damage," Jackson said. "Fuel's leaking. We won't make it all the way back." Elena thought fast. "There's an abandoned outpost 5 clicks west. We can make it if we stay low and cut power to non-essential systems." She turned the helicopter toward the coordinates. The flight was rough. Every minute, the engine groaned, and the smell of burning metal filled the cabin. The SEALs sat in silence, gripping their rifles, watching her work. They had never seen anyone so calm under pressure. Commander Hayes leaned forward. "You saved our skins back there, Widow. I owe you my life." Elena didn't respond. Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "We're not home yet," she said. "Keep your head down." Minutes later, the outpost came into view. A patch of flat ground surrounded by broken walls and empty supply trucks. It wasn't much, but it would do. Elena brought the helicopter down gently, her hands trembling only slightly as the landing gear touched the ground. The moment the rotors stopped spinning, the silence hit everyone at once. The SEALs jumped out, securing the area. Jackson unbuckled his harness, still shaking. "You just flew through hell and made it look easy," he said. Elena took off her helmet, her face streaked with sweat and dust. "It wasn't easy," she said quietly. "It was necessary." As they inspected the damage, the others realized how close they had come to dying. The tail was shredded with bullet holes, one of the blades was cracked, and the fuel tank was nearly empty. Yet somehow she had kept them in the air. Command finally reached them over the radio. "Widow 1, do you copy? We lost your signal. What's your status?" Elena pressed the transmitter. "Command, this is Widow 1. Package secured. Widow 2 is down. We're safe for now." There was a pause. Then the Admiral's voice came through. "Copy that, Widow 1. You did good. Stand by for recovery team." Elena sat back in her seat, finally allowing herself to breathe. The SEALs were alive. The mission was complete. The price had been high, but they had made it. Jackson looked at her, still amazed. "How did you know that drop would work?" Elena gave a tired smile. "I didn't," she said. "I just knew we couldn't stop flying." Outside, the desert was quiet again, the wind softly blowing over the sand. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, showing the first glow of dawn. For a moment, everything was still, and as the men rested, watching her in silence, one thought echoed in all their minds. The Black Widow had just saved them all. The sun was just rising when the rescue team finally spotted the damaged helicopter resting in the desert. Its black paint was covered in sand, the tail was riddled with holes, and one of the rotors hung slightly bent, but it was still standing. That alone was a miracle. The rescue chopper circled once overhead before landing nearby, sending waves of dust into the air. Elena Marquez sat in the pilot's seat, helmet off, staring at the horizon. Her uniform was torn, and her face was streaked with dust and sweat. She hadn't slept in over 24 hours. Every part of her body ached, but she didn't show it. She just watched the sunrise quietly, as if making sure the world was still there. "Ma'am," her co-pilot Jackson said softly, stepping up beside her. "Recovery team's here." Elena nodded slowly. "Good. Make sure the SEALs get medical checkups. They took a beating out there." Commander Hayes, the SEAL leader, walked up, his arm bandaged but his eyes full of respect. "You're something else, Widow. I've flown with the best, but I've never seen anyone do what you just did." Elena gave a tired half-smile. "You'd have done the same for me." Hayes shook his head. "No, I'd have tried. You did." The recovery crew helped everyone board the transport helicopter, but Elena stayed behind for a moment. She ran her hand along the side of her chopper, her partner through fire, sand, and fear. "You did good," she whispered quietly to the machine before walking away. When they arrived back at the base, the mood was completely different from the night before. Word of what had happened spread faster than the radio could carry it. Pilots, mechanics, and officers came out to see them land. Everyone wanted to see the team that had survived the Widow's Run, as people were already calling it. As the helicopter door opened, Elena stepped out slowly, her boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. The sunlight hit her face, showing the exhaustion in her eyes, but also the quiet pride. The noise of the crowd faded as she walked across the tarmac. People were whispering, pointing, some even clapping softly. Inside the command center, Admiral Cole was waiting. The same man who had once teased her call sign now stood at the center of the war room, surrounded by officers. He had heard every detail: the missile locks, the canyon flight, the impossible dive, and the survival of all 6 SEALs. The Admiral had seen heroes before, but this story was different. As Elena walked in, the room went silent. She stopped just inside the doorway, her posture straight despite her exhaustion. "Lieutenant Commander Marquez reporting, sir," she said. Her voice was steady. The Admiral didn't speak at first. He just looked at her, really looked at her. The dirt on her uniform, the cuts on her arms, the calm in her eyes. Then he walked forward slowly, stopping just a few feet away. "You brought them all back," he said quietly. "Yes, sir," she replied. "Every one of them." "You lost your escort," he said. She nodded. "Widow 2 went down during engagement. We couldn't recover them." Her voice softened at the end. She hadn't allowed herself to grieve yet, but the pain was there in her eyes. The Admiral gave a slow nod. "You still managed to complete the mission and save 6 lives while flying a damaged aircraft through enemy airspace. Do you have any idea what the analysts said when they saw your flight path?" "No, sir. They said it was impossible." For a long moment, the room was quiet. Then, in front of everyone, Admiral Cole straightened his posture and saluted her. The entire command center froze. It was tradition that lower-ranking officers saluted higher ones first. But the Admiral didn't care about tradition right now. He said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "You earned your name, Black Widow." Elena's eyes flickered with emotion, but she quickly returned the salute. "Thank you, sir." Then, to everyone's surprise, the Admiral turned to the rest of the room and said, "Take a good look. This is what courage looks like. Remember her name." The officers who had laughed before were silent now. Some lowered their eyes. Others stared at her with a kind of awe they couldn't explain. The same people who had doubted her now saw her as something else entirely. A leader, a fighter, a survivor. After the debriefing, Elena walked out of the war room. The hallways that had once felt cold and judgmental now seemed different. Crew members nodded respectfully as she passed. Mechanics stopped what they were doing to salute her. Even the rookies, who had heard the story already, looked at her like she was a legend come to life. Jackson caught up to her outside the hangar. "Ma'am, everyone's talking about you. They're calling you the Black Widow of Iron Dusk." Elena laughed softly, the sound a little tired but warm. "That's a mouthful." "They mean it with respect this time," he said. She looked out at the rows of helicopters lined up under the sun. The sky was bright blue now, calm and endless. "Respect isn't given," she said quietly. "It's earned. One mission at a time." Later that day, when most of the base had gone quiet, Elena stood alone beside her damaged helicopter. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the sand. The air smelled of oil and metal. She rested her hand on the bullet-riddled frame, remembering every second of the night before. The fear, the noise, the silence that followed. A small part of her still couldn't believe they'd made it. But she wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about the men she'd saved, about the team that never gave up, and about the ones who hadn't come back. From the distance, she heard someone shout, "Black Widow, the Admiral wants you in the strategy room tomorrow morning." She smiled faintly. "Looks like rest will have to wait." As she walked away, the wind carried her footsteps softly across the tarmac. The war room that had once laughed at her name was now filled with silence and respect. Everyone knew what she had done. And though she didn't seek fame or glory, Elena Marquez had become something rare in the world of soldiers and pilots. A symbol of calm courage, a reminder that strength has no gender, and that true heroes don't need to speak loudly. They just do their duty, no matter how dark the night. Days turned into weeks after the widow's run. The story of that night spread far beyond the base. Soldiers whispered about it in the mess halls. Pilots retold it in the hangars, and even new recruits learned her name during training. Black Widow wasn't just a call sign anymore. It had become a legend. Elena Marquez, however, didn't act like a hero. She kept her routine the same. She still woke up before dawn, ran laps around the airfield, and checked her damaged helicopter herself, even when mechanics told her to rest. She didn't like the attention. She didn't care about medals or praise. What mattered to her was that her team was alive and that she was ready for the next mission. But deep inside, something had changed. That night in the canyon had left a mark. Every time she closed her eyes, she could still hear the sound of the missile lock, feel the vibration of the helicopter falling through the air, and see the faces of her crew as they held on for their lives. Sometimes, she woke up in the middle of the night, her heart pounding, remembering the moment she almost didn't make it. One evening, as she was sitting alone near the runway, Jackson came over with 2 cups of coffee. "You're gonna wear yourself out, ma'am," he said, handing her one. Elena smirked slightly. "You worry too much." "I worry because you don't," he said. "You've been checking that helicopter every day since we got back. You barely sleep." Elena looked at the chopper parked under the floodlights. "That machine saved us, Jackson. I just want to make sure it's ready if we ever need it again." Jackson sighed. "You know, they're talking about retiring that model. Command says it's too damaged to repair." Her jaw tightened slightly. "They can retire the model, but not me." Just then, a messenger ran up to them, holding a sealed envelope. "Lieutenant Commander Marquez," he said, saluting. "Orders from the Admiral, ma'am." Elena took the envelope, opened it carefully, and read the contents. Her eyes moved slowly down the page, and Jackson waited nervously. "Well?" he asked. She folded the paper and slipped it into her pocket. "Looks like we're flying again." The next morning, she entered the war room, where Admiral Cole and several high-ranking officers stood around a digital map. Her presence immediately changed the mood in the room. Everyone straightened up. "Black Widow," the Admiral said with a small smile. "Good to see you again." "Likewise, sir," she replied. He gestured to the map. "We've got a problem. A special ops team is trapped in hostile territory, similar conditions to your last mission. They need extraction before sunrise. You're the only pilot who's flown that region and lived to talk about it." Elena studied the map silently. The coordinates were deep inside enemy land. The path was dangerous. Narrow mountain passes, heavy anti-air defenses, and unpredictable weather. A single mistake could kill them all. "Who's my crew?" she asked. "Same as before," the Admiral said. "Jackson's already prepping your new chopper. We're giving you the latest model, faster, tougher, and equipped with advanced countermeasures. But if this mission fails, we'll lose both you and the team." Elena nodded once. "Then we don't fail." As she turned to leave, the Admiral called out, "Marquez, why do you keep volunteering for these missions? You've done more than enough." She paused at the door and looked back. "Because, sir, when others stop flying, someone has to keep going." Within an hour, Elena and Jackson were airborne again. The sky was dark, and clouds gathered ahead. The hum of the engines filled the cockpit, and the faint glow of the instrument lights reflected in their eyes. "Déjà vu, huh?" Jackson said with a nervous chuckle. Elena smiled faintly. "Let's hope this one ends with fewer holes in the chopper." As they crossed into enemy territory, the radio crackled. "Widow 1, do you copy?" "Copy, command," Elena replied, crossing into zone, switching to silent mode. She flipped the switches and the cockpit lights dimmed. The helicopter glided low over the dark landscape. Below them, mountains rose like sleeping beasts, their shadows stretching across the ground. For hours, they flew in silence, every sense alert. Elena's hands moved smoothly across the controls, adjusting their altitude, scanning for threats. The radar beeped once enemy patrols were near. She whispered, "Stay low. We'll pass under their detection." They dropped to treetop level, skimming over the terrain like a ghost. The sound of the blades was barely audible now. Jackson held his breath as they passed within a few miles of an enemy base, lights flickering below. Finally, the coordinates appeared on the screen. The trap team's distress signal was weak but still transmitting. "We've got them," Jackson said. "Prepare for extraction," Elena replied. "We'll be in and out fast." They hovered over a small clearing surrounded by rocks. The SEALs below waved their flashlights in coded signals. As the helicopter lowered, gunfire suddenly erupted from the ridge. Bullets pinged off the armor. "Ambush!" Jackson shouted. Elena reacted instantly, adjusting the helicopter's position to shield the SEALs as they boarded. "Go! Go! Go!" she yelled over the comms. The SEALs climbed aboard quickly, dragging one wounded man with them. Elena could see the enemy figures on the ridge, closing in fast. Jackson yelled, "They're firing RPGs!" Elena slammed the throttle forward, lifting the helicopter sharply just as a rocket exploded where they had been seconds before. The shockwave rocked the aircraft, but she held steady. "Everyone strapped in?" she called out. "Affirmative. Then hold tight." She pushed the chopper into full speed, weaving through the mountain ridges. Enemy fire followed them, but Elena's movements were fast and precise. The new helicopter responded like an extension of her own body. Jackson stared at her in disbelief. "You were born to do this," he muttered. Elena's voice was calm. "No one's born for war, Jackson. We just learn how to survive it." By the time they cleared the last ridge, dawn was breaking. The golden light of morning spilled across the sky, and the gunfire faded behind them. The wounded SEAL was stable, the others safe. "Mission accomplished," Jackson said softly. Elena allowed herself a small smile. "Not yet. Let's get everyone home." As they flew back toward the base, the radio came alive again. "Widow 1, command here. You're clear. Welcome home." She took a deep breath, looking at the sunrise ahead. For a moment, she felt peace, the kind that comes not from winning, but from saving lives against all odds. That day, when they landed, no one laughed at her call sign anymore. Everyone knew what it meant. Black Widow wasn't just a name, it was a promise. A promise that as long as she flew, no one would be left behind. The morning after the rescue, the entire base was buzzing with energy. News of the second impossible mission spread like wildfire. Everyone was talking about how Black Widow had done it again, flying straight into enemy territory, saving the trapped SEALs and returning without losing a single life. Pilots were calling her flight path the Widow's Wing, and even the toughest soldiers nodded with quiet respect when her name was mentioned. But Elena Marquez didn't join the celebrations. After the debriefing, she walked quietly to the hangar where her helicopter stood, dust still clinging to its surface. She ran her hand over the metal, feeling the warmth of the morning sun on it. To her, this wasn't about fame or glory. It was about survival, duty, and the unbreakable bond between a pilot and her team. Jackson found her there, leaning against the landing gear. "You know, they're giving you another medal," he said with a grin. "The Admiral said it's already been approved." Elena smirked lightly but didn't look up. "Medals don't bring back the ones we lose, Jackson. I don't fly for that." He nodded, understanding her silence. "Still, you earned it. Twice." Before they could say more, Admiral Cole appeared at the entrance of the hangar. His footsteps echoed across the floor. This time, there was no teasing smile or joke about her call sign. His expression was serious, but his eyes carried something else, pride. "Lieutenant Commander Marquez," he said, his voice steady. "You've made history twice in 1 month. I've seen a lot of brave pilots in my years, but what you did, that's something we'll be studying for years to come." Elena turned to face him, her uniform still dusty, her hair tied back loosely. Weeks after the rescue mission, the airbase had returned to its usual rhythm. Helicopters came and went, Soldiers trained under the hot sun, and the constant noise of engines filled the air. But something had changed. Everyone walked a little taller, spoke a little prouder, because of one name, Black Widow. Elena Marquez had become more than a pilot. She was now a symbol of courage and discipline across the entire fleet. Posters with her squad's emblem were painted on hangar doors, and younger pilots began wearing small spider pins on their uniforms in silent tribute. But Elena herself stayed humble. She didn't like attention. For her, each mission was not about fame, it was about responsibility. Lives depended on her, and she never forgot that. One morning, the base commander's aide knocked on her door. "Lieutenant Commander Marquez," he said, "the Admiral requests your presence in the conference hall." Elena looked up from the flight log she'd been writing. "Now?" "Yes, ma'am. It's urgent." She quickly put on her cap, straightened her uniform, and walked across the airfield. Everyone she passed nodded respectfully. Some even saluted before she could. It still felt strange, how people now looked at her with awe instead of skepticism. A few months ago, they had laughed at her call sign. Now they spoke it with pride. When she entered the conference hall, she noticed it wasn't just the Admiral there. Several senior officers, journalists, and camera crews were present. A large banner behind the podium read, "For distinguished valor and bravery in combat." Her steps slowed. "Sir, what's this about?" Admiral Cole smiled warmly. "Black Widow, you've been nominated for the Navy Cross, the second highest military decoration in the United States Navy." The room broke into quiet applause, but Elena stood frozen. "Sir, I was just doing my job." The Admiral nodded. "Exactly, and that's what makes you different. You didn't ask for glory. You didn't run from danger. You led your team through hell twice and brought everyone home. That deserves recognition." A reporter asked, "Commander Marquez, how does it feel to be called the Black Widow of the skies?" Elena paused for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "It's strange," she admitted softly. "When I first got that call sign, people laughed at it. They thought it was just a joke. But out there, in the middle of the storm, you stop thinking about names. You just think about the people depending on you. If my story means anything, I hope it reminds others that courage isn't loud. It's quiet, steady, and it keeps going even when everything else falls apart." The room went completely silent. Even the Admiral looked moved by her words. Later that evening, after the ceremony ended and the cameras were gone, Elena walked back to the hangar alone. The sky above was painted with shades of orange and gold. Her helicopter, the same model she'd flown through the canyon, stood ready again, newly repaired and polished. She ran her hand gently along the metal surface, remembering every scar it once carried. "You've earned your rest too," she whispered. Jackson appeared from behind the aircraft, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Still talking to the bird?" he teased. Elena smiled faintly. "She listens better than most people." He handed her a cup. "You really made history today, you know. The first woman in your unit to receive the Navy Cross. The Admiral couldn't stop talking about you." "I didn't do it alone," she said quietly. "You were there. So was Hayes and his men. We all did it together." Jackson nodded. "That's true. But you led us through it. You were the reason we made it back." They stood in silence for a while, watching the sunset over the desert. The air was calm, a rare peace after so many storms. After a few minutes, Elena spoke again. "You know, when I was in flight school, one of my instructors told me something I never forgot. He said, 'A real pilot doesn't fight the wind. She dances with it.' Back then, I didn't really understand what he meant. But now I do." Jackson looked at her curiously. "And what does it mean?" She smiled softly. "It means sometimes the world will throw everything it has at you. Fear, doubt, pain. You can't control it all. You just have to keep moving with it, trust yourself, and find your way through." As night fell, the base lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the runway. From somewhere in the distance, a group of young cadets were practicing takeoffs. Their voices echoed faintly across the field. Elena watched them for a moment. "They'll be the next ones," she said. "The next to face the storm." Jackson chuckled. Think any of them will ever fly like you? Maybe better, she said with a grin. That's how it should be. Just then, her radio buzzed. Commander Marquez, this is operations. We've got a civilian transport in distress off the coast. You're the nearest pilot. Can you take it? Elena looked toward the sky, then at Jackson. Guess the widow doesn't rest after all. He grinned. Wouldn't have it any other way. Moments later, the roar of the helicopter engines filled the air again. The blades spun faster and faster until they became a blur. Elena climbed into the cockpit, strapped herself in, and adjusted her headset. Widow 1 ready for takeoff, she said. Copy that, Widow 1. You're cleared. The helicopter lifted gracefully into the sky, cutting through the cool night air. The base lights shrank below her, and the stars stretched endlessly above. She felt the same familiar rush, the mix of fear, purpose, and calm focus. As she flew toward the horizon, a voice came through her headset. It was Admiral Cole. Marquez, before you go. The war room's quiet again. Every time your name comes up, nobody dares to speak. They just listen.